Good morning to all of you. How are you? Yeah, may I formally welcome you to the plenary session number 3 on the third day of the World Agroforestry Congress here in New Delhi, India. I would like to say that I'm hoping that most of you are going to find it very useful. I have personally found it very useful and exciting. I would like to say that yesterday we listened to insightful presentations and participated in a wide range of topics on how the private sector and business community has taken advantage of the knowledge generated from agroforestry to be able to establish and produce very useful products as well as services. I do remember in some situation where some of the commodities, the yields have been increased tenfold, thereby translating to increased income to the producers. We also found that they have been able to actually come up with very specialized trades, particularly with regard to nutritional benefits, as well as with regard to the health benefits of for the well-being of mankind. We have also seen that through agroforestry, we have been able to restore landscapes and therefore contributing to improved livelihoods as well as safe environment for mankind. Today, we are going to focus much more on knowledge generation, particularly how best to harness useful knowledge and technologies for the well-being of mankind, particularly in trying to improve the well-being of mankind as well as creating a safe and healthy environment. And it is this particular process of being able to actually generate the knowledge and technologies and commercialize these particular technologies that we call scientific innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, today to start us off, we are having two eminent scientists, lady scientists, who are going to give plenary presentations and keynote speeches. The first one is Dr. Tatiana Sir, and Dr. Tatiana Sir is a native of the Amazon basin in Brazil. She has background both in agricultural meteorology, particularly she did her MSc in biometeorology, and then she did her PhD in plant ecophysiology. She is a lead scientist at the Embrapa Institute, which is the national agricultural research organization in Brazil. Besides, she did actually serve as the executive director of Embrapa and is also serving as a visiting professor to a wide range of universities within the Amazon basin. After that, we have another eminent speaker, that is Dr. Shreckenberg, who is teaching at the University of Southampton in the UK. Dr. Shreckenberg has a background in botany, as well as forestry, an MSc in forestry and landscapes, and also has got a PhD in non-timber forest products. Dr. Kat has also worked for UNESCO and GIZ. It is my pleasure, ladies and gentlemen, therefore, to introduce to you and welcome Dr. Tatiana Sir, who is going to speak on innovations in agroforestry research to meet wide challenges, the case of climate change and food sovereignty. Dr. Tatiana, you're welcome.
Good morning to all of us, and I'm very pleased to be here. I would like to acknowledge the invitation, and I am going to share some reflections about this subject. At first, if you go into those challenges which are related to climate change and food sovereignty, we can see you have more than just those 2 points. to achieve sustainable food sovereignty in a changing world with a growing population, changing diets, and changing climate. It's a quite hard task, mainly because we are also under a new science environment. So to tackle with this challenge, we have to make a lot of changes which we are not very well prepared to do. And how innovations in agroforestry research can contribute to achieve these challenges. This is a question we have to go into each of the slides because it's a challenge which has no just one direction, one address. At first, if you go into food sovereignty, you have some details, we have some points which make us a challenge, to face a challenge more than you think just about food security. So you have to think more on more than just to offer food. So we have to connect this with ecologically sound, sustainable methods. And we have also to go into how, where this food is available and what kind of system you are using in this area. And also, we have to think how the human population is growing with respect of the balance of developed and undeveloped countries. So what does this mean if you face this challenge of climate change and food sovereignty in this scenario? The changing diets are also quite important because we don't have just one direction of changing diets. We have one direction which goes the revision of meat consumption that changes a little bit in some places. People who used to eat meat is changing due to a lot of health problems with important reflection in policies, the occupation with livestock, but also we have some emerging countries which are changing the demand for processed foods, and this changes also a lot of ideas about land use, the meat, the whole of the meat, and this is quite important in countries where the deforestation, the soybean production is increasing, so it's not easy and a single thing. And we have a lot of challenge now about how to improve forest food challenges, how to take advantage of what is offered by natural vegetation, which is increasing in the very few years. And the new challenges associate also with alternatives of diets which were not well discussed before. And all of those have a strong reflection if you think about agroforest systems, mainly if you talk about the tropical countries. Also, many meetings, many summits are raising very important points, like the Planet Under Pressure for 2012, which raises the risk and the opportunity issues. The risk of threatening of water, food, biodiversity, and critical resources, but also the opportunity that we are at one point, you have a lot of options to go ahead. New ideas can be spread quickly with the media. So you are always with this compromise. The IPCC report, in the last one, it has a clear idea about the role of human being in this changing world, and also about what are the key factors we have to have in mind for the next few years, just to see at which extent we can mitigate the scenario which is close to us. Every day we have a lot of news about very recent signs of climate change, which are directing us we have just a urgent need to change a lot of behavior, a lot of plans and policies. So we have to think about this, wake up before it's too late. So this has a lot of implications about our issue with agroforest systems. The resilience of climatic extremes is a clear point. We have already some results about the agroforest as a solution, as one of the points to be thought in policies for mitigating or even for recovering very extreme events. The Anthropocene is one thing which is raising the comments about, and there's something which is more serious thought than just all, if you think isolatedly of climate change or other signs. This is a very important point in the history of humanity, and we have to think about bringing a new responsibility to science, people, institutions, and government. And after a lot of things are being written these last years about this, and some of them point about which characteristics might be thought if you think about the Anthropocene situation. So the systems might be productive, efficient, restorative, climate-friendly, equitable, prestigious, resilient, compatible, diverse, communicate, and organized. So these are some ingredients we have to think about agroforest systems in this new moment. After this, the point about the Anthropocene idea, a lot of new ideas are coming, many controversial ones, ideas about the theory of Anthropocene. One of them is the anthropogenic biomes of the world that makes a lot of difference if you think about agroforest systems. So I like in Brazil, for instance, I am showing a slide with part of some biomes, like the Amazon biome is the Cerrado biome. And we have the pristine areas, and we have the anthropogene diverse areas. So what are the implications of this to innovation in agroforestry? A lot of signs of recognition of agroecology as an approach towards the security, food security and agricultural sustainability. After the agriculture and crossroads of the International Assessment of Agricultural Knowledge, Science, Technology and Development in 2009, and the very well-known report of Olivier Deschutes, a lot of institutions are coming to a new moment, bringing agroecology to the agenda. And for sure, this is a quite important point to agroforestry, since mainly for the tropical areas, agroforestry seems to be one of the best ways to exercise about agroecology. So if you go, for instance, into Amazon region, we have two major groups of agroforest experiences. We have some with a lot of stativist component, and the other which is more with organized agroforest systems. Both of them are very good examples which could go into agroecology agendas. The concept of climate-smart agriculture raised by FAO, where the trees are key components also, it's another way to think about the role of agroforests in sustainability agendas which are presented. So we have a lot of possibilities of thinking about agroecology and the agroforest systems in the framework of agroecology, going into the adaptation scenario. The large concept of development, which is coming strongly, like Lydia Brito from UNESCO is pointing out about trying to be more inclusive to people, centered in people, has a lot of possibilities also in this slide. Another quite important point to think about innovation, research innovation, agroforestry at this moment is how, which I mentioned at the beginning, is how also we are facing a change in science. So we had a turning point recently where you don't have much more isolated persons, isolated groups working research. So you have a tendency of papers and very important documents with a large number of researchers. And to tackle this situation, this multiple vision, we need to have to face all those wide challenges like climate change and food sovereignty. You can't do isolated. So you have to go into a new dynamics of research. How the research institutions are reacting. So CGIAR and with all the centers are in a very intense campaign of trying to change to face this new scenario. If you go into the programs for each country, you can follow the signs of change also. For instance, in France, INRA, which is a national institution for research in France, is undergoing a lot of modifications just to face this moment and bringing agroecology and also bringing the idea of trees in the program. At Embrapa, where I work, there's a Brazilian network for research. We are having a lot of effort on that. So we have a change in the whole program of research. We have sort of portfolios and arrangements which are trying to put together a lot of projects associated with big issues. And this, for sure, is a new moment for thinking agroforestry as countrywide, but mainly in areas like the Amazon region. So you have a good space for natural resource climate change. We have food security and nutrition health also. And we have some opportunities to put together this in big agendas. What I can say now, we have actually, at this point, we have to think in innovation, not just the innovation associated to technologies and processes. We have to think of this technology and process from the perspective you are being demanded at this moment, with all these interconnected issues and also with this very dynamic possibilities of science working together with people from one institution to the other, where the modeling and the monitoring tools need to be quite different than those which you used to foster before. New approaches to research with a strong interface between science, decision makers, and policy and business. This is the key point. The institutional innovation is actually one of the big challenges for all of us. New approaches to capacity building, education, exchange of knowledge, communication, governance. When innovation based in local needs, something which you have to go from the base. We have to go into many tools to understand the adaptive cycles of all those things. We have to understand how the things are going from one period to the other in the area. We have to know what kind of people, the trajectories of the persons which are involved, and all the policies possible. So we need more studies aiming to understanding multifunctional performance of agroforest systems along the time. And this is not, we don't have much studies in this way, at least in my country. At this point, we are thinking in one, although we are in a very urgent agenda, we have to think about transition process, and not just transition processes associated to environment quality and productivity systems. This is important. But we have to think about some perspectives associated to agroecological transition levels, for instance, which you can go into steps, changing the components of systems, the arrangements, changing the connectivity between the producer and the consumer, but strongly we have to think about social and political ecological transitions, which these are the motors of the transforming scenarios. And we have to recover socio-cultural dynamics centered in social cooperation, social participation, sustainable management of common assets, which are key factors in this moment of climate change. Also, transition to social sustainability. So this transition process might be a key in many agendas. And to do that, we are needing also to change a lot our character of disciplinarity. So we are coming from one situation of monodisciplinarity, multidisciplinarity, pluridisciplinarity, interdisciplinarity, but the moment asks us something more, which is associated with transdisciplinarity, just to tackle all those big challenges and also take opportunities of exchange experience with the other, but mainly we have to do this with people which is outside the research institutions, the people who are needing our results. So this is a key point for reaching this challenge. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Tatiana. May I now call on Dr. Shreckenberg, who is going to speak on agroforestry of the future. What science do we need? Kat?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome. I'm very happy to be here, and it's hard to follow such a wonderful presentation from Tatiana, but hopefully a few words will be useful. The theme of this conference is about accelerating the impacts of agroforestry, but what kind of impacts do we want? What sort of future are we hoping to build? And what kind of science do we need to get us there? I want to use my 15 minutes to show you a few frameworks developed in the last few years, which I think can be helpful to us when we're thinking about how to make agroforestry a more effective and widespread use for the future. The first is the Planetary Boundaries framework put forward by Johan Rockström and his colleagues at the Stockholm Resilience Institute. They define 9 interlinked biophysical processes which are essential to maintain the Earth as a viable place for humanity to continue to thrive in the way we have done in the Anthropocene. For each process, they define a threshold above which, they argue, we risk irreversible change or a tipping point. While they're still arguing about the exact thresholds, I think the idea that there are planetary thresholds which affect all of us and which we need to manage at a global level is quite a powerful one. On the diagram, if you're not familiar with it, the inner green shading represents the proposed safe operating space for these 9 planetary systems, and the red wedges represent an estimate of the current position for each variable. And as you can see, we've already greatly exceeded the boundaries in 3 of these systems, which are the rates of biodiversity loss, climate change, and human interference in the nitrogen and also the phosphorus cycle. Obviously, it's immediately clear that agroforestry has a lot to offer on each of these processes, but there are still significant information gaps. On the biodiversity loss, that's the boundary which we've transgressed the most, according to Rockstrom et al. Extinction rates today are estimated to be 100 to 1,000 times more than natural background rates. So we know that agroforestry is a more diverse production system than conventional agriculture, but there's still much we need to know about how and when agroforestry best supports what kind of biodiversity. Should we be promoting agroforestry as part of the so-called land sharing system, in which you've got agriculture and conservation on the same piece of land? Or is it more effective to go for the land sparing approach, where you have them on 2 separate land areas? I think the research on this topic is still just starting, but it's very clear that it depends on the type of agroforestry being practiced and the type of biodiversity that you're looking to conserve. Some species do well in agroforestry landscapes, others need large expanses of their natural habitat. So we need to be specific about what we're talking about when we do this research. Rockstrom and colleagues highlighted the role of agriculture in perturbing the natural nitrogen cycle. Agriculture, through its manufacture of fertilizers and cultivation of leguminous crops, converts around 120 million tons of nitrogen from the atmosphere each year. That's more than the combined effects of all Earth's terrestrial processes. Agroforestry is obviously beneficial in that it reduces the need for artificial fertilizers through the use of leguminous crops and manure, for example, but leguminous plants are nevertheless still fixing atmospheric nitrogen, so we do need to understand more about what constitutes just the right amount of nitrogen at different scales and in different contexts. Similarly, we need to know the same about phosphorus needs of different systems and make sure we're applying them at the right amounts. We've already heard a lot about climate change at this conference, but really we need to move ahead on 2 fronts. One is adaptation, and the multiple products provided by agroforestry systems provide a certain resilience to farmers, helping them to survive whatever the weather and the economy throw at them. However, the longevity of the tree components is a risk. We need to be sure that farmers are planting the right varieties for their area, both now and into the future with their changing climates. So we need more research into the appropriate varieties for different ecosystems and much better forecasting of likely climate change impacts in different areas, and much better information to farmers about weather when we do have that information. Social science also has much to offer here, providing, for example, more information about how best to operate affordable and reliable insurance schemes for smallholder farmers. We also need to mitigate, and there was a whole session devoted to the extent to which agroforestry can contribute to sequestering carbon above and below ground. But we still need to understand more about the trade-offs between managing for carbon and for other products in agroforestry systems, so that farmers can be properly compensated for this new product. On the social side, we need much more understanding of the advantages and disadvantages of various mechanisms like REDD+ to incentivize tree planting. Work I did in Uganda a couple of years ago suggests that if farmers are not provided with the right information, they and their children can be tied into very long-term contracts for 50 years, for example, to plant and maintain tree species which are not necessarily the most appropriate for their particular livelihood strategies. And unfortunately, we found those contracts don't have information about what happens if farmers change their minds because of changing markets or personal circumstances, so that they want to convert their trees to some other land use. So we need to understand more about these mechanisms and how they fit into a dynamic and changing world. As a more socially inclined scientist, I was very happy when Kate Raworth, who was the chief economist at Oxfam, added an important social dimension to Rockstrom's diagram. She argued that while we certainly need to live within the planet's biophysical boundaries, we also need to recognize the need for more development to ensure that all people on this planet are able to live a healthy and fulfilled life. She called this the social foundation, below which nobody should fall. The 11 themes that she includes in this diagram were based on priorities put forward by governments in their submissions to the Rio+20 conference in 2012. And in the diagram, you can see the blue area indicates the proportion of people in the world who are below the social foundation in each respect. So taking food as an example, the blue area there represents the 13% of the world's population, that's 850 million people, who are still undernourished. For some issues, like resilience, voice, and jobs, she's left the area blank because we have no internationally agreed metrics on these data or data on these important issues. And if you take each one of these in turn, you'll find that agroforestry has a potentially important role to play in supporting people to reach the social foundation, either directly through the provision of sufficient and nutritious food, for example, or indirectly through generation of income to invest in education. But looking through the conference program, I notice that the areas that we perhaps haven't covered enough yet are gender equality. Tony mentioned that yesterday, and Tatiana and I are doing our best to help on that front here. But also social equity. We haven't really done enough on how agroforestry can promote social equity or empowerment. How can agroforestry help to empower farmers to have a stronger voice in negotiating with other actors in the system? And also in jobs, finally, jobs are so important. Whenever you go to rural areas, you talk to the poorest, the landless, the people who have land that's too small to really do any kind of profitable agriculture. What do they want? They want jobs. And I've seen very little in this program that talks about the many jobs that agroforestry can offer, both in production, but also in processing and marketing. Rayworth then went on to combine her own diagram with that of Rockstrom to produce this one. It's often referred to as the donut because it shows this green donut-shaped space between the social foundation and the planetary boundaries. This is a space which is both safe and just for humanity, and in which the interdependence of human well-being and planetary well-being are assured. I find it a very positive vision. Rather than telling us where we don't want to go, a 2-degree rise or more in temperature, for example, or more than 10 billion people on the planet, it gives us an indication, a vision of where we do want to go at a global level. And it can also be helpful when it comes to examining our own actions, both as individuals and as professionals. This is my last diagram. This one's produced by the previous authors, Rockstrom, Rayworth, and Melissa Leach from the Institute of Development Studies in the UK. And Leach and her colleagues have been working on this idea that there are multiple pathways to sustainability. And in this diagram, they attempt to integrate that idea with the donut concept. And you can see that there isn't just one, but many ways of staying within this safe and just operating space, depending on your local context. And we recognize that in agroforestry, which can range from very small, highly diverse, family-based systems, sort of home garden systems in the tropics, to extensive parklands in the Sahel with some communal management, and commercial-scale systems in temperate zones. But it's important to recognize those pathways that threaten to drop people below the social foundation or push us up above the planetary boundaries. And I think there's a very important role for social scientists here, because the direction and the distributional or equity outcomes of different pathways are often not determined by the particular agroforestry technology being practiced, but rather by the behavior of various actors, the interaction of knowledge and power, and the political economy. So particularly important for us is to understand what role agroforestry plays in farmers' livelihood strategies. Not all farmers are the same, and yet we continue to look for and develop one-size-fits-all packages. And a distinction made by Dorwood et al. Might be helpful to keep in mind when we try to understand why the uptake of agroforestry often seems to be less successful than we hope for. Dorwood distinguishes 3 types of farmers: those who are just hanging in the face of great adversity often. They're unable to take any risks, and they often have to diversify out of desperation. So when we talk about agroforestry producing diversification, it's a good thing. We have to be aware that for some people, it's despair that drives them to diversification. Then there are those who are stepping up able to invest in and expand their activities, whether that means expanding their agroforestry to a greater area or adding new or better crops. And then the final group who are stepping out and may see agroforestry as a means of accumulating enough to move on to more lucrative activities, perhaps still in the rural economy as in processing or marketing, which makes them an important advocate of agroforestry. We need to be aware then of which category farmers are in and realize they'll want different things from their farming systems. As Howard Shapiro said very eloquently yesterday, agroforestry should not be about poverty, but about prosperity. And that may include eventually getting out of farming altogether. We need to also recognize that there will also always be trade-offs between the products desired by different beneficiaries with different levels of power and persuasion. So, for example, will commercial plantations of agroforestry tree products be able to operate alongside smallholders and not take away the opportunities that smallholder producers have? I hope so, but we need to look at how best to organize that. And can smallholders produce both conservation benefits or carbon sequestration at the same time as maintaining and improving their livelihoods? So resolving those trade-offs requires transparent processes with very clear criteria and an idea of where we want to go. That's why having that vision of the future is very important. And here's another area with a need for more social science input, understanding the political economy of decision-making. However good our evidence, we can't be sure that decisions will be just and fair until we understand power dynamics at all levels. We also need in this area to collaborate with civil society and governments much more to support farmers and farmer associations to negotiate fair deals. So coming back to my original question of what kind of science we need, first of all, we need good science. It's got to be good quality because farmers cannot afford to take risks. We can't give them the wrong information or one information and turn around the following year and tell them something else. So our science must be rigorous, and we have to provide clear information about not just the biophysical, but also the socioeconomic context in which it was carried out, so that we know what can or cannot be scaled up and out to other areas. We need to recognize that there may be big contextual constraints, gender relations, for example, caste systems or market systems, which are very different in different systems, so that research in one area may not easily be transferable to another. And we shouldn't be scared to report failures, because we can often learn as much from what does not work as from what does. And I was pleased on some of the posters yesterday to see very open and honest acknowledgements of some failings. We need to make sure that science is integrated across multiple dimensions. And I did try to draw another diagram here, but too many dimensions. I couldn't make that one work. So across local to global scales, we have products that are sold locally to those like carbon that are being produced for global benefit as well. And that means understanding how market chains operate at those different scales and for those different products. We also need to look at different temporal scales. For example, seasonal weather cycles, but multi-year economic and political cycles. And unfortunately, those biophysical and institutional processes don't always operate at the same scale, so that makes life quite complicated. We need to integrate across indigenous knowledge to modern science, and from the biophysical to the social sciences. And on the social science, I'm particularly thinking about the political economy and understanding the big drivers of change, which are important in determining uptake. We can't work just on our agroforestry systems. We need to know what else is going on in the landscape and the economy that is determining farmers' decision-making. And we need science that is carried out by multiple actors, engaging public sector and private sector from the beginning. Only then can we avoid that gap that we often see between sound evidence on the one hand and poor policy on the other, or between good policy and poor implementation. Finally, working with a range of different partners should also help ensure that science is demand-led and oriented towards a positive goal. Namely, I would suggest enabling people to pursue their multiple agroforestry pathways towards prosperity in a way that doesn't push us over the planetary boundaries. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Kate. Thank you very much, Tatiana, for those complimentary, wonderful, and insightful presentations. May we just appreciate them with just a clap. Thank you. I think that opens up on what we are actually having most of the day, because this sets the basis upon which we are going to go into the groups. But before we do that, I would like now to invite our eminent panelists who are actually scientists and lead scientists in their own right. May I begin by calling on board Professor P.K. Nair, Eduardo Somarriba. Eduardo Somarriba. Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. And of course, Eduardo Rojas. That's right. May we have the other one? I understand our, of course, we have CATIE with us, and we have Tatiana with us. The last presenter, of course, panelist is not with us. And therefore, what I'm going to do is that you have actually heard from our two keynote speakers, Tatiana as well as CATIE, and they have given us very good insights on two complementary topics: innovations in agroforestry research and agroforestry for the future. I would like to call upon now our panelists to be able to add more value, enrich, because they are eminent scientists in their own right. And I would like to begin by actually inviting Professor P.K. Nair to make some comments in about 4 to 5 minutes. Prof. Yes, I think this is better. Or can we bring? Yes, I think that will be better.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Yesterday, Director General Simons told us that the panelists should avoid the PowerPoint and all that if possible, but he also allowed us to use it if he felt it would be necessary. So I take that, and I would use a few PowerPoint slides to make my points. Again, it was very exciting to hear the presentations this morning by our colleague, our keynote speakers, and I'm really catching on them and following on some of the ideas that they have presented. And in this conference, we have heard so many talks. I took this number, approximately 200, from one of the early website presentations of the Congress. It may have been more. We all hear, we have been hearing repeatedly over the past 3 decades or more that agroforestry can do this and that. Agroforestry has got so many potentials, so many benefits, so many advantages, so many applications, so on and so forth. So we have heard a lot of these things over the years, and we also heard a lot of them in this Congress. Wonderful, this was expected. But I think we need to take a moment and sit and relax and think about that. This has been talked about, but what has been said? I would say, in spite of all these talks, it seems only a little new is being said. So I challenge the audience to take upon themselves and see how much of what has been said is new. Because there is a difference between opinion and facts. Everybody has the right to his or her opinion, and opinions based on gut feeling, the so-called gut feeling, leads to lots of claims about potentials and benefits and opportunities and advantages and all that. But opinions are different from facts. See, all the radio talk shows and political commentators and scientists and journalists, everybody has got the right to the opinions. But I think it is our duty as scientists to bring out separate the grain from the chaff and bring the science out. A claim becomes valid only when it is proven by facts. And there are principles and procedures of getting these things done in science. And we need to validate our claims by hard facts. And that is the challenge of science, because and science is based on facts. So that is my challenge. And in evaluating science and pursuing science, we need to to realize that there is good science and bad science. All reported science, unfortunately, all reported results are not trustworthy. We come across lots of shoddy experiments, flawed procedures, poor analysis. Well, no problem, we will get them published. Well, getting them published alone does not mean that, thank you, but getting them published alone does not mean that we have established something new. And that's a big challenge. The hallowed peer review process that we all have come up through has lost some of its shine. It has become sometimes it has become a sort of mockery. This is very, very bad. And the blame goes to the publish or perish doctrine that we all have lived through. When I was a graduate student 40, 50 years ago, it was the axiom. And it is much more powerful axiom today that if you don't publish, you perish. And by corollary, if you publish, you prosper. So there is a lot of rush for publishing, and in that process, a lot of, if I may say, a lot of things get published which are not publishable. And then we have a problem of cherry picking of results. And we, Kate has already alluded to this thing, we have a tendency as scientists to take only things that we want to take, not what we need to take. That's really unfortunate. Negative results are seldom reported. They are not favored in publications. And for example, about 2 decades ago, in the 1990s, early 1990s, only about 30% of papers published, about 30% of the papers published negative results. But today, the estimate is that only about 15% of negative results are reported. But negative results are results. We need to report them, we need to understand them, we need to evaluate them. Then only we can make progress. So, out of the 200 talks at this Congress, let us ask how many of them are based on opinion versus facts? How many of them have presented new hypotheses? How many papers with results that can be replicated have been presented? How many negative results have been reported? Because at the end of the day, when we are evaluating, assessing the breakthroughs and innovations coming out of the Congress, we have to take stock of the situation and ask some hard questions. Are we really facing an intellectual bankruptcy in agroforestry? I don't want to elaborate on that, but think about that. And also, to me, it seems that there's a lot of rush in commercialization of agroforestry. When we started agroforestry 3-4 decades ago, the emphasis was on smallholder farmers, resource-poor situations, and so on and so forth. It still is today, but we have, I think, a tendency to commercialize it, inviting lots of business investments and all that. My dear friends, don't forget that the green revolution has become a greed revolution. So we don't want to fall into that trap. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think Professor Nair does not need any introduction. He's one of the founding members of Agroforestry, and of course, he's currently the distinguished professor and director of the Center of Subtropical Agroforestry. May I then call upon Eduardo Somarriba, distinguished scientist at CATIE.
Thank you very much. After working yesterday through all this long list of posters, you always have this impression that there is so much that you can tell about agroforestry, the different examples, how it works in this condition, all the combination of crops and trees, new methods. I was very happy to see eco studies in soils, new instrumentation, science, political science, communications becoming upfront, not only all the biophysical, although still a lot of biophysical work and not so much social and political work, but this is happening. We're looking at clones, the integration of clones in agroforestry. So it is true there is a lot of things that we've been seeing for the last 32 years, all these productivity analysis in different combinations. They're there, but there's some new things happening. But together, the presentations, panel discussions, and posters that we've seen reveal some key problems. Lack of generality, for example, is something that really brings to my attention. Many of the studies are site-specific, and maybe this brings this problem of replication. Can we replicate the results? Can we generalize? This is one issue that needs to be taken into consideration. We also discussed a lot about the deficiencies in the communication of the results, the knowledge to science, to farmers, but not only to farmers, to the other stakeholders in the agroforestry value chains. The need to address some specific issues that are related to the trees themselves. Agroforestry with the trees face many of the same problems forestry have dealt with for many years. Rules, legislation that is not favorable to the planting and the use of the trees. Many cultural beliefs, tenure problems, the role of women in trees. All these problems were detected. The lack of institutional development. We need institution. If I go to Nicaragua and I want to talk about agroforestry, where do I go? Do I go to the forestry department? Do I go to the agriculture department? Our Indian colleagues are trying a new model, creating an intergovernmental platform, but still there's going to be some institutional problem. What are the real representation of agroforestry in the institution? And that will have implication for policy and for programs, supporting programs. We need better enabling environments. We also face this issue of long waiting periods to recover the benefit from trees. And most of us, farmers included, are short-term planners. We want things right now. The problems are now here. And we also talk about the disconnection between science and development, between producers and markets, between farming and business, and so on and so forth. So this brings an obligatory questions. And this is, if we solve these problems, will we solve the problem of agroforestry? And I think not. Some time ago, Dennis Garrity said, what do we have to do to ensure that agroforestry spreads like a bushfire? I think it's a very important question. And we can find examples of the opposite of all the problems we have seen. I worked in the Andes for some time, and I saw the expansion of the cultivation of coca in the highlands. The worst enabling environment for coca production, yet coca was expanding everywhere. There was no communication channels, and everybody knew about how to grow coca. There was no research, but all the innovations were there. So there's something happening. Do we have to work with legal trees? I don't know. Maybe we have to look for value of the trees. If you look at other crops, like coffee, for example, in Latin America, you have all the development, all the institutional development is there, the technology is there, the knowledge in the farmers, but yet we still have a lot of problems. Not everybody is using all the technology. We still have environmental problems. So we need high-value crops. We need a highly integrated science. So I was kind of getting depressed. No? We got all these things happening in all the science. We have examples that if we solve those problems that we face in agroforestry, yet we'll not be able to make agroforestry the most important land use and solve the problems we wanted to solve. I think there is a way out, but we have to be moderate in our expectations. We have to prepare for long battle. Agroforestry is a long-term crop, and we have to systematically address all these issues. Nothing's going to happen from one day to the next. We need some things we need. For example, we need to devote more work to create a good institutional framework. I think this is crucial. If we don't have the framework, then it will not be possible to have long-term planning. And this will bring in the policies and the program to support the development of agroforestry. We need to mainstream agroforestry and the education. Education is key. at all levels, from farmer field schools, farmer-to-farmer program, short-term program for extension workers at the university level, BS and postdoc level. We need education and education and education. We need a science which has generality, applicability, but it has to also need to be applicable in very specific condition and context. So we need generality and specificity. Maybe we need to do more meta-analysis. We have to integrate science into the development process, and this will have implications for setting the agendas. We need a demand-driven science more than an offer-given science. We have to give a lot of attention to effective communication with all the stakeholders, not only with farmers, and we're focusing too much on farmers. We have to really look at the entire agroforestry value chains. We have to work on all the models, farmer to farmer, farmer field schools, traditional existing systems, all the new technologies, cellular phones, and so on and so forth. Integration is a key word. Production to markets, farmers to science, private and public, women in all the spheres of action. We need to add value to the three products, maybe the coca syndrome. Traders, donors, policymakers should be integrated also in the next World Agroforestry Congress. Integration is key. So I have a final reflection on science. We normally think as researchers when we gather in these meetings that science is everything. We're assuming really on science. It's a big sum. When we look at the investment in science, we're talking about 1–2% of GDP in most conditions. And this is the reality. But we look from the science context and we think we are the best important. We think it is granted. And we really have to really place science in the general dimensions. When you look, for example, at the cocoa sector or coffee sector, in Costa Rica, coffee produced 2.5 million sacks at $200 each. That gives you $500 million worth every year. If you multiply that by 5 or 10, that will be the impact on other spheres of the society. That's a lot of money. When you think about the amount of money that we invest in science in coffee, that's a very tiny, tiny fraction of it. And we want to move this big ship with a very small amount of money. So we have to give science the proper dimension it takes. We ask the scientific community to provide solutions to all these problems, but we have to be reasonable. We really have to make sure that not only scientists, but the rest of the society that is involved in the agroforestry value chains has to be involved. If we don't get them involved, there will be no possibility for us scientists to really make a big change. We have to involve the governments, the policy decision makers, and the educational systems. Agroforestry development is an integral problem. We had a first wave of agroforestry in the 80s and 90s. Everybody wanted to talk about agroforestry. Then it was silent for some time. Now it's back again. This is a second wave of agroforestry. We have to ride the second wave the best way we can, like masters. But one thing is true, we need more trees, and this is what we are here for. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Eduardo. And now it's my pleasure to introduce the Professor Eduardo Rojas, the Assistant Director General of Forestry at FAO, Rome. Professor.
Chair, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a very special pleasure and honor to address you today on the occasion of the World Agroforest Congress held in Delhi, capital of India this week. I would like to commend the two co-hosting partners, the Government of India through the Indian Council of Agricultural Research and the World Agroforest Center, ICRAF, for convening this Congress. The joint leadership has been able to gain momentum and to bring agroforestry into the international agenda. India has been very successful in the past years to stop and revert deforestation by empowering rural communities in forest management and promoting agroforestry. Despite the huge pressure on land, the forest area is growing and trees outside forest produce socioeconomic benefits for millions of rural people in this historic and impressive country. As chair of the Collaborative Partnership on Forest, the CPF, I am much honored as well to attend this Congress in which one of our most committed members, ICRAF, has been leading. Allow me to recall that ICRAF's Director General, Tony Simons, is presently the Vice Chair of the CPF. I would as well like to recall the late Michel Gauthier, FAO's extremely committed agroforest officer who unexpectedly passed away exactly 1 year ago. But why is agroforestry crucial now? The present food production model is not suited for many tropical and subtropical countries, generating important environmental impacts, mainly deforestation, but not only deforestation, as well as social tensions and neglecting diversification opportunities. In a people-centered approach, agroforestry in its 1,000 modalities is much more successful to combine in harmonic synergy diversified food production, fuel for cooking and heating, non-wood forest products, building materials, environmental services, and resilience, both of income, fodder for cattle, especially in dry periods, and disasters, including climate change. Agroforestry in that sense is the quintessence of climate-smart agriculture. A significant part of the world's poor people are rural population, and agroforestry is one of the strategies to overcome rural poverty. Agroforestry has a unique potential to preserve cultural heritage and traditional knowledge that by both standard options, either migration to cities or conventional agriculture, is condemned to be lost. And I would think this cultural function has also to be kept and retained. Agroforestry is the single land use that can combine food production, and we still have 842 million hungry people worldwide, with environmental services provided by tree cover in dense populated countries like India, characterized by smallholder structures. And more than 2 billion rural poor depend on firewood for cooking and heating. And agroforestry is a crucial option to ensure sustainable, near, and reliable supply. And in drylands, very especially, the firewood collection is the main reason for forest degradation. I would also like to recall one of the models of agroforestry, which is the silvo-pastoral model, which is a very interesting opportunity for producing animal protein with low greenhouse gases and no demand of cereal. And this is the big challenge for 2050 to ensuring food security for the growing population. It's not so much the growth in absolute term or relative terms, it's very especially the growth of meat and animal protein that is creating worries for 2050. In that sense, silvopastoral models may be very interesting, and in difference to the more strict agroforest models, they are much more of big scale on communal lands than the traditional one. So it's important also to keep the silvopastoral approach as well. But what impedes the expansion of agroforestry? On one hand, the institutional aspects due to the scattered administrative responsibilities divided between ministries of agriculture and environment, and even if both sides, the agro and the forest part, are in agriculture, the different services are normally quite of different nature, and even frequently we get not the correspondent statistics, the land of a country. If you add the forest and agricultural land, then there is more land used than the country's area. So we have really frequently problems here of statistics as well. And if we go to the present process of the SDGs as well, where will agroforestry fit? Into the food SDGs or into the natural resource or ecosystem SDG. So as well, there is a challenge regarding institutional scatterment. The governance, a lack of a sufficient enabling environment, especially in the legislation and in tenure, the lack of tailored financial instrument, the lack of sufficient trustful statistics that is also linked to the poor possibility for research to work if there is very little basic statistics to work with. And of course, also from the research part, as was commented by before speaking, the fact that agroforestry is that much multifaceted, which is a wealth, makes big challenges for research, especially if not sufficient critical mass is achieved. So what can we do to enable and to spread agroforestry? From FAO side, we're working hard to contribute by our normative products like the Agroforest Policy Guide, the contribution to the Great Green Wall for the Sahara and the Sahara Initiative, the Forest Landscape Restoration Mechanism, the Safe and Grow Initiative, the climate-smart agriculture, regional initiatives like the RISE one here in Asia, the Forest and Farm Facility, the Sustainable Forest Management Toolbox, the voluntary guidelines on responsible tenure of land, the assessment of trees outside forestry, of forest, e-learning, and very especially the International Conference on Forest and Food Security held in last May in Rome that many of you might have attended. But I would like also to recall that it's very important the fact of communicating these methods of agroforestry, and for sure congresses like this are a big occasion, and for sure 2015 brings as well a very good occasion due to the chance of the International Year of Family Farming. And I would also like to recall the chance next year of Expo Milan devoted to food, where a big occasion exists, especially in the countries that are important in agroforestry, to highlight the role of agroforestry in the national pavilion. And as Commissioner General for the UN for Expo 2015, I invite you to take all these opportunities and to work with the UN in that sense. Allow me to close expressing that agroforestry is the third path that can answer the challenges we face regarding food, climate change, and overcoming rural poverty in a balanced and consistent way. And if we take or not the chance will depend on the momentum we are able to create and to grow. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Professor Rojas, for that insightful and telling us what FAO is trying to do and contributing to agroforestry development in the whole world. Last but not least, it's my pleasure to introduce Gunathilake, the director of the Coconut Research Institute, Sri Lanka.
Good morning. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity by CRAF and ICR and all organizers. I represent Coconut Research Institute of Sri Lanka. Very interesting keynote 2 addresses, and it evoked our knowledge and our what we did last 30 years of our research on agroforestry, and I learned a lot from your technical presentation. I think those were the keywords attract me: land sharing, nitrogen cycle, multiple crops, carbon storage, social foundation, job opportunities, space for humanity, and agroforestry for whom. So, with my knowledge, I think first is the agroforestry should focus in my recommendation. It look at the country's development program. Very simply, in Sri Lanka, we are totally dependent on the energy importation petroleum. So one of the main expenditure, half of the foreign exchange we spend for importation of petroleum. So that's give the agroforestry give the vast opportunity to apply in our country on renewable energy sector. Second thing, as you said, we are a developing nation, island nation, and again our food habits are very rapidly changing now. In 1970s, it was so popular on demanding for carbohydrate, rice and other tuber crops. But we are now in the era of consumption oil and protein. But now oil for coconut we are getting oil, and oil palm is also has introduced. Now we are coming halfway of self-sufficiency on vegetable oil section. But the question is the protein. Now it was 80% of our milk actually imported as a powdered milk to the country. Now the government clearly declared we must self-sufficient by cattle milk production and other protein demand 100% by another 2-3 years time. So thanks for ICRAF. We are taking your knowledge and your experience and all things in our country, how we can help agroforestry to achieve our protein requirement and so on. So again, another point, I really represent the coconut sector. It's a perennial crop, 6 years of lifespan, very vast opportunity to apply agroforestry. That in dear colleagues, friends, over the last 35 years, we heavily applied agroforestry, whatever the knowledge, theoretical or whatever, trees on to integrated coconut-based farming system. I think we published many articles, books on that. And that is why in country, more than 40 years ago, I remember, we haven't had epidemiological Gizidia in our world. But now, you never believe the Gizidia, one of the very attractive agroforestry tree, we declared as a fourth plantation crop. Tea, rubber, coconut, never believe this agroforestry tree. The government, cabinet declared as the fourth plantation crop because of the agroforestry intervention through the Coconut Research Institute in Sri Lanka. Thanks again, once again, for ICRAF and Oxford Forestry Research Institute. I remember even the Professor Gunathilake is also here. In 1980s, I just participated as a young scientist on multiple tree legume program, multiple tree system, MPTS program. That was the beginning in agroforestry. Later on, we were able to build up a very good relationship with the craft. Remember on that. In 2011, we signed an MOU. Thanks for Kenya and the craft for helping us to rethink and redirect our program. So in agroforestry, we are now really applying in Sri Lanka agriculture, the food production, fodder for, as I explained, the milk, and fuel, energy. And again, there was another very recent question on that. Use of fertilizers for fertilizers and other input for some tree farming system. But in one project I said, the GCDA and other these agroforestry trees, those are fertilizer trees. Remember Dr. Simon? So most of you participated in Sri Lanka, one of the agroforestry research program. I think we declared the GCDA and those trees are fertilizer trees to enrich our soil. That is why I support your nitrogen cycle. I think we know now 150 kilograms of biological nitrogen could be achieved in our soil by cultivation of GCDA. I think we did over the 20 years of experimentation. Another point I wish to make it out, use of land sharing on crop production and energy crop production. There was some belief by FAO, I don't know. What I have seen it, always the food crisis emerged through the energy crisis. 1971 example, another one in the 2010. So both 2 years, the Sri Lanka also suffered on the food, similarly the energy. So then, can we separate energy and food crop land? So my personal view is, it should be a complementary, not competitive. I give a good example. Lastly, I wish to give you 2 examples. One of the diversified river program in Sri Lanka, called Mahaveli. So there are some people living in irrigated land and others are upland land, no irrigation facility. One village, not a village actually, area called Kajuatta, there are 560 families. So they are not supported by irrigated land. So their income was so low, lot of poverty was there, one example. So then we introduced cattle for them. We thought the milk production is very attractive for them. So what are the trees, the fodders, what are the grasses? No irrigation. So Girishi are one of the trees we introduced to them. Over the last 5 years, they completely grown their Giridia, used the paddy straw. They themselves found the good feeding for animals. So now, all the 560 families, I am live with them now. So they are producing at least 15 liters of milk per animal. It is okay for our country, our situation. They are the 2 things they develop. One in the outside income. Secondly, they are family nutrition. So that is again support for the keynote address in the morning. One good example. Yesterday, it was a very attractive presentation on business, agroforestry and its business. Today I am here, I am working now for the energy project, 10 megawatt power plant, wood-based renewable energy. So that project involved 3,500 hectares of land So by this September, we'll have to plant 4 million Glycidia trees to get 400 metric tons of Glycidia wood per day to run a 10 megawatt power plant. Can you imagine the involvement of the job opportunities, families, land, sharing, nitrogen, whatever your organic carbon and environmental service. So that project is now scheduled in this country by another next year to add another 10 megawatt power to the Eastern Power project, Eastern Power Supply. So with that, with this remark, I appreciate the 2 keynote addresses. We learn a lot and we can readjust our thinking and future direction. And again, I think those things support us agroforestry in our country. I very proudly say it helps for food security in Sri Lanka, and energy security is most important, and again the environmental services. So that is why I believe the world is getting better. The agroforestry support for that. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Members, we are just on time. It's exactly 1:30. But I don't want to be able to stop without giving an opportunity to members of the public to be able to interact with the participants. I'll give about 3 to 4 questions to the plenary members to be able to actually interact with our keynote speakers as well as our plenary speakers. May we have the lights on so that we can be able to see? We'll begin from that end. Yes, please, you'll have to introduce your name, yourself, and of course, be very brief with the questions.
Thank you very much. I'm called Simon from the Parliament Forum on Climate Change, Uganda. I think we are happy with the proceedings so far, and one of the aspects that are coming out from the several presenters is the gap between science and policies. So personally, we have been working on this in our country, and I've been asking myself, how can these scientific technologies begin becoming integral parts of government advisory services in agriculture, in the agricultural department? Other strategies also needs to be instituted. For example, how best do we take these technologies and make them convincing to the politicians? One of them, I think, would be simplifying our languages and telling the politicians that actually their votes can be enhanced by good agroforestry practices. Otherwise, if we tell them the technical jargons, they become disinterested in some of the things we do. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll take questions, and then, of course, we'll invite the panelists to be able to respond. From that end? Okay, we move to the other side. Yes. Please, your name, and, of course, the question. Yeah, the lady. Logistics team.
My name is Pranita Mudliar. I'm a PhD student at the Ohio State University, and I was really interested in the comment on generalizability and replicability. So isn't there value in doing case studies and site-specific research, which is supposed to be contextual, because contexts are so different and landscapes are so different? So isn't there value in doing context-specific research, which might uncover certain variables, and maybe that can be tied to different sites or contexts?
Thank you very much. Yes, yourself.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Augusta. I'm a Muvuli Trust delegate in this conference, but I'm also from Uganda. I very much got touched by the issues concerning effective communication of all the initiatives, research projects related to agroforestry. I come from a communications background. In all that has been said here, and in all that is being done by the researchers, in as long as we do not effectively communicate what we conceptualize and what we discuss in big conference rooms like this, we are not delivering development to the people that we serve. What I'm saying is we need to translate the science we have seen, especially on the posters, into consumable language that our communities can consume. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I take that one more of a comment. Let's have the other end. Yes. Okay, then the last one will be at the end. So let's have our sister there and then at the end.
Thank you very much, the Chair. I'm Alice Mushugi from Wild Agroforestry Center in Nairobi, and I'm picking up on a comment that was raised by Professor Nair on what we are looking at into the innovations in science, actually in agroforestry. And my concern more is on the tree breeding with the species that we have in the agroforestry. Looking through the presentations that we are having and also the posters that were raised, I looked through and I really looked through to see the topic of genomics coming up. If this was a crop or a health forum, you'd see the issues, because the research technologies that are coming up is understanding the genomes of the organisms, whether it is animals or plants, and even the human. But it looks like within the tropics, because most of us here, the presentations were more within the tropics, is that we are neglecting understanding the tree components from the genomic aspect. And I do appreciate, and I'm happy that when Howard mentioned on the sequencing of the 101 genome, that we'll be understanding in that. So my issue is that the tree breeders, is that we look into more into improving, even on the trees, as much as we are doing the action research on the farms, we also need to improve on the trees that we are saying they are good for agroforestry, not just removing them from the natural resources and placing them on the farms. So mine is just a comment, but not on the question, on the areas that we really need to look into. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The last person at the end.
Thank you very much. My comment is possibly directed to Professor Nair, although a few others also made comments on the area, excuse me, on the area of not publishing so-called negative results. Professor Nair, I've been your student for the last 20 years, although you don't know it. And given your provocative talk, it looks like I'll be your student for a while. I am a scientist in business. I'm from the private sector in Kenya. And I started working on indigenous fruits in the Miombo woodlands in Tanzania some 19 years ago. And even there are some unpublished results because some of the negative results that came out of propagation trials. Now, interestingly enough, being in business, I have learned that ultimately we succeed because we fail. We know what it means to fail, and we know what it means to succeed. We fall, we get up. We fall again, we get up again. And that's how ultimately we succeed in business. And the reason it allows us to do that is because we have a long-term vision. And that's what allows us to go through these cycles. Are they painful? Definitely. Is it pleasant? No. But is it necessary? It is. And so I wanted to just re-emphasize that in order for science to be successful, we need a long-term vision. I don't think we can have short-term funding cycles. I don't think we can have short-term vision when it comes to science, and especially the science of agroforestry, if we want to claim to have good science. And so it is my hope that those of you who are leading the work in agroforestry, such as yourself, Professor Nair, as well as the Agroforestry Research Center, and as well as others, that the challenge I'd like to put forward is that out of this conference, we would have a commitment to report all results.
Sorry, may I request that you be brief?
Yes,
Yeah.
and that is my question, whether that could be a key result coming out of this conference, that we would report all results, be they so-called negative results, but also positive results, so that we can focus on the long-term science of agroforestry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
I think she was the last speaker.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Allow me to, because of time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, sir.
No. I'm saying that we have come to the end of questions. We need to manage time. Allow me to manage time. Yes, I think we come to the end. I want to appreciate that. I would request that you interact with the panelists during tea break. That will offer us a good opportunity. But I realize that we're having 2 comments and 3 questions. And the last speaker directed her question to Professor Pikenia. I would like that he responds to that. Prof, you'll be brief because of time.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Yes, I really appreciate that at least some people found my brief intervention provocative, and that was the objective. That's very good. I mean, I really appreciate what you said, the last speaker. Somebody also mentioned, they brought up the issue of location-specific research versus replicability. Well, these are all issues that we always discuss in science and agroforestry research. I will be very happy to discuss that further. Now, Albert Einstein once said that if you have not made any mistake, those who have not made any mistakes, that means they haven't done anything.
Thank you very much, members. I think you'll have to bear with me because of time, and we really have to be able to manage the time. For the sake of that, I would like us to be able to call on Kat to make her closing remarks, then followed by Tatiana. Kat?
Just to say that I thought all those interventions from the floor were really excellent. There was a lot of discussion about communication and getting our message across. I think we perhaps are a bit self-defeating because partly due to funding cycles and funding pressures, we invent new names for the same things over and over again, and which just ends up confusing people. My own work started off very much under sort of people and plants banner. I'm now talking about ecosystem services approaches. We have landscape approaches, eco-agriculture, evergreen agriculture, socio-ecological systems, and agroforestry, and yet we're all trying to achieve the same thing. There's a huge overlap between all of those. Perhaps each of those names just focuses on, more on one element than another of the overall system that we're looking at. And we need to be not too competitive with each other when we're writing and when we're talking in our briefs to policymakers and the general public. We shouldn't present our new name as being something completely new, but let's draw on the history, let's show how it's integrated, and perhaps the best way of doing that is by having that common vision that several people mentioned from the floor, and that I feel is very important, that we have a positive vision that we're heading towards, and that is perhaps something more than anything that we can communicate to policymakers, because they are hopefully looking to the future and partly to the votes that they're trying to get. In terms of communication, I think it's important not just to communicate directly with the top policymakers, but with their advisors, who are often the ones who are in post longer term. We need to educate them. We need to have a much stronger program of educating the media. Having good environment correspondence can make all the difference, because scientists can't do everything. I found myself as a scientist that I'm expected to do all sorts of things. I'm expected to learn to be a brilliant communicator. It's something that you learn slowly and painfully, but there are people who are trained to communicate. So let's work with people who have that as a professional training to help us communicate our message properly. And I guess in the end, the big issue we have is that the world is changing faster than it ever has for the human population, at least. And so science, apart from being good, as we've said, inspiring to people with a good vision, it's got to be adaptive and dynamic. We have to keep moving forward in our work. Thank you.
From all the presentation, also the first question about the gap between science and politics. And I think a key issue I would like to raise is the institution issue. Actually, with all this fast change in the world, we have a completely different pattern of institutions. And the key roles for agroforests now are different from the key roles of agroforests some years ago. For instance, in my country, if I go briefly to the list of the ministers which are related to the issue, I go to 21 ministers. If some years ago we were concerned mostly about 5 ministers. So you have demands associated to trees and agroforests growing in different directions. So we have to go through from the local to the global, thinking about institutions. And I think here should be a congress like this should be a very important moment to discuss this completely different world of institution, not just public institution, but also how the stakeholders are represented. So it's a quite interesting game when I went to be a director of Embrapa, and suddenly I was changed to the one kind of a directorate to the technology transfer. And the first worry I had was to understand better what was the representation of the different levels of institution, just to start working and building some agendas. I think this institutional issue is perhaps one of the most important ones, because through this one we can actually advance in many scales.
Yeah, thank you very much. May we then appreciate all the participants, the panelists, with a clap. That brings me to the end of sharing this session. I want to appreciate you so much. Thank you.